Need some props? I've got enough.
Hello my dudes! So today I'm gonna do a complete build video of my 5S rig because it's already pretty beaten up and needs some love. And I'm also gonna show you all the teeny tiny tricks I do to make this build a success. But before I get into this, I wanna announce a small giveaway. As you've seen in the intro, I've got more than enough props now because I just recently swapped to the HQ prop 5141. So I've got more than enough 5 by 4.5 and 5 by 4.8 V1S props lying around. So in order to take part of that giveaway, of course, you need to subscribe to my channel, guys. And as soon as you subscribed, just check out the link in the right upper corner on my channel to my Discord server. There are actually not that many people on the Discord, so your chance of winning those props is pretty high. And I also pick 3 winners, so not just one, I pick 3 winners because I've actually got more than enough props here. And yeah, check it out and win some props. So this is my 5S rig. It's already pretty beaten up as you can see here on the arms. And I also want to try out new motors. And I also gonna use a different PDB. So this in there is a Mr. Steele PDB. And I gonna swap to the Wolf Reverb PDB over here. And yes, it actually gets a complete new frame with the arms and the top plate, and those are the new motors. Those are the T-Motor F40 Pro 2 with 2150 kV. I've also got some custom, this is actually very nice. I've got some custom blue titanium screws that gonna hold this thing together. I'm also using some custom standoffs, as you can see here. So those, before I've got those rubber standoffs that should actually soft mount the FC a little bit, but it's not working very well. And then on those rubber standoffs, I don't have enough space to use those O-rings here. So I bought some of those nylon standoffs. Those are also a little bit different ones. I just got them at the electronic store. So usually they are like 10 millimeters tall on the lowest sections, and they also are 10 millimeters tall on this M3 thread over here at the top. But I've actually cut it down a little bit to get more space between the FC and the top plate, because I'm mounting my VTX, my TBS Unify Evo on the top plate, as you can see here. And I also need to tinker around a little bit with these wires. So this is also a very good tip. Whenever you get like wires like this or pigtail connectors, don't throw them into the dustbin. So keep them up. You might need them one time. So like this cable over here with this connector that goes into the pigtail, keep them, don't throw them away. I'm also gonna use some Loctite for the screws, the bottom screws. Those are my new props. So HQ durable prop 5.1 by 4.1 by 3. They actually a little bit bigger in diameter, and they are really great. So they give extremely high thrust at the low throttle position, and yeah, I just love them. What else do we have here? My tools, some Atix hex screwdrivers, ranging from 1.5, 2 millimeters, 2.5, and a 5.5 nut driver. And yeah, the usual stuff you need for building quads. For mounting the VTX and the antenna, I'm usually using this Velcro zip tie thing here. They look like this, to give it a little bit of a cushion, and at the end I'm just using one little zip tie. And yeah, that's actually the way I mount the VTX and the antenna. And that's also a little bit special on my build. So on the top plate, I've cut off the top plate here a little bit to give it some room for the immortal L antenna, as Mr. Steele calls it. So this is actually the antenna how Mr. Steele mounts it. So let me take this thing apart real quick, and then I'm gonna show you how I put all this stuff together again. So it's actually the next day because it got a little bit late yesterday, but I will move on with the disassembly of my 5S. So here's actually just the flight controller, the KISS V2 with the receiver wired on it. I'm not gonna change anything on here because that's still fine. The only thing I'm gonna do is I will try to make those solder joints a little bit prettier again. But that's actually about the wiring. So I've got the ground and the 5 volts are like those two pins. So the left one is the ground, then the 5 volt, and then it gets interesting because here we've got the channel 1 and the channel 2, so the Crossfire TX and RX, and you have to solder the, let me see, so the channel 1 is the top one on the opposite side of the ground. So channel 1 on here is white, so channel 1 needs to go to this pad here right next to the gyro, and the channel 2 needs to go to the TX2 pad on the KISS FC. So that's how you wire up the Crossfire. And this is also pretty important if you use a PDB. Make sure that you don't mess up the 2 pins here, else you will probably explode your VTX, your FC. Oh, and one more thing I would like to talk about. So I'm using those 8 screws are for mounting the arms, and they screw from the bottom plate through the arm up into the press nuts from the upper plate. So when I built my first quad, I used those red aluminum screws everywhere down here. I also used them on the edges here. But in the beginning I broke so many arms, it was ridiculous, because when I crashed, the aluminum screw here got torn apart, and therefore the top plate didn't hold the crash anymore. So as you can see here, it bends without the connection. And in most cases the arm broke just because of this, and right here somewhere underneath the screw. So what I did was I swapped out the aluminum screws here in the outer edges for steel screws, and I've never broken an arm since then. Alright, so I've got all the electronics loose and got rid of the PDB. Now I'm gonna clean all the solder joints on the FC and everywhere else on the ESCs, and also gonna prepare the new cable for the VTX, because I've cut this through here because I actually looped the video from the camera through the PDB and then out into the VTX again, and because I just used the wire for the VTX, and you can power your camera directly from the TBS Evo, but I'm not gonna do this on the new PDB. So I actually had to charge up my GoPro batteries, and meanwhile I prepared all the ESCs. So I pre-tinned them and already soldered the wires on them except for one. So I'm gonna show you one. I also pre-tinned the PDB already. And I also cleaned up the FC a little bit. Oh, and I also prepared the wires already for the VTX. So on this one I'm using the VBAT, I think, so high voltage. The PDB actually gives me 9 volts, I think. The ground, the video, and then we have got the channel 1 and channel 2 for the Crossfire protocol. I might show you this here. So this is the VTX wire. We have got the 9 volts from the PDB, the ground, the video, channel 1 and channel 2. And over here I've already prepared the wire for the camera. On the cam I will have like 5 volts ground video, and the blue one is the OSD wire to control the camera itself. For those wires here, if you're planning to do the exact same setup like I do, you're gonna need 4 red wires with a length of about 27 millimeters, 4 black wires with a length of 27 millimeters. Those are 18 gauge, so American wire gauge. And you're also gonna need the green wires are for the signal, telemetry and ground. I've got some here. So on those you're gonna need 8 wires of those with 21 millimeters and 4 wires with 24 millimeters. and those cables are 26 AWG. So those are the wires, and for the pinout of the PDB, here in the middle on those two, wait a second. So here in the middle is the place for the microphone that's already included. On this side you've got the out ports for the VTX, and here you've got the ports for the camera. And over here you would have some spare UARTs, and yes, this PDB already got UARTs, so it's actually a CPU more or less, where you can place, I think, GPS for sure, but I think also a buzzer and stuff like that. But I would have to look that up. Yeah. So on those ports you can have a magnetometer, a GPS, and an RSSI pad, and I think a LiPo, a voltage pad or something like this is also on there. And then you've got the pads for the 4 motors, of course, and the plug that goes to the FC. Because of the VTX, you've got, what do we have here? All right. You need to check if you've got the Rev2 or one of the first batches, because on the Rev2 the pinout is a little bit different. So over here you've got the audio out, which you can also, no, that's just audio. Here you've got the video out. There you have the high voltage, so it's 9 volts, I think. The ground, the TX and the RX, if I remember correct. Yes. So the TX and the RX. So those two are important if you're using like a crossfire system and stuff, because you can control your VTX with those 2 ports. If you're using smart audio, I think you also have to hook it up to the TX of the PDB. And on this side you've also got the TX and the RX for cams that got digital control, and then you've got the ground 5 volt, the video in, and the audio in, I think, or the OSD. No, so here you've got the OSD. So ground 5 volts, video in, and the OSD, so the cam control for an analog camera. So this is actually the PDB, and now I'm gonna show you how to solder up this ESCs here. I'm actually just preparing the ESCs, and as soon as I soldered them up on the PDB, I also gonna prepare the motors and the wires for them. Alright, just one important thing I forgot to show you. On those ESCs, you've got some tiny solder pads right here next to the status LED. And if you bridge those solder pads, you reverse the spin direction of the motor. So you can actually also do it in the ESC flasher, but I usually just bridge 2 out of 4, and those will be the ESCs that go counterclockwise. This is how I do it. And if I still get the wrong direction, I can still like turn it around in the ESC flasher. So let's get into the fun part. Like building the frame. This is the upper bottom plate, which comes like so. And between those 2 plates you will get the arms. I've already inserted the press nuts here. Make sure that you use a screw you don't need anymore to screw it in, those press nuts, because it might be that the screw gets damaged and you don't want to have a damaged screw on your fresh build. So the first thing I'm always gonna start with the frame is like those 2 plates and the arms in between. For this thing we're gonna need these washers here that come with the Reverb kit. And you're also gonna need some hex screws that also usually come with the Reverb kit, but I've got those nice titanium screws because they are lighter than steel screws but still as tough. And you're gonna need M3 times 10mm and M3 times 15mm usually. Alright, and as soon as you tighten them up so they don't move anymore, what I do next is I start like to glue them in. So I start with 1 screw at 1 arm, make it loose. What I usually do is I just put some Loctite into this nut over here, into the press nut. And then I make sure that there is the Loctite everywhere on the thread, especially in the press nut. So this might take a while now. I'm gonna speed the video up a little bit so you don't get bored. Finished. So if you would ask me for 1 word to describe this frame, I would say toughness. So as long as you don't use aluminum screws on those outer holes here, you will hardly ever break an arm. So since I'm using steel or like now titanium screws, I've never broken an arm. Never. Before I broke an arm, I always smashed the motor in like 1,000 pieces or something like that. Here and there you will bend a standoff or something like that, and maybe break the top plate. So if you get a hit at your battery, you might break the top plate, but the top plate is actually easy to replace. So now it's time for the next step. I already gonna assemble the standoffs now. And I gonna use the 3 longer standoffs here in the front section, and in the back section you sometimes get some shorter standoffs here in this place, because there are some antenna mounts included in the Reverb pack usually. But I'm gonna use the normal standoffs because I'm mounting my antenna in the Immortal L configuration in the back. So let's do it. Alright, slowly it starts looking like a frame. Now it's time to place the PDB where it should go. And oh no, before I actually have to solder on the microphone. Else I will never ever be able again to... I actually don't use this microphone on the PDB because on the VTX cable I've just got a video wire and the TX and RX for the control. I actually don't use smart audio, which would be on the audio port, so I'm gonna have to live with that. And on the microphone you really have to take care about the polarization. So there's a little plus on the microphone and the plus on the solder pad here, and it's actually not very easy to solder this thing on there because it's just so freaking tiny. And I'm also gonna use those titanium screws for the motors if I ever manage to freaking solder that microphone on there.
One eternity later.
That's the way how to do it. Just bridge it and then wipe off the rest of the...
Later that same evening.
Perfect. So the way to mount this PDB, actually, you're gonna get some double-sided sticky tape with the PDB, and you're gonna stick it on there like so, and then you can mount the standoffs. So I finally made it. I sticked it on there. So I'm not gonna put on the standoffs right now. because before I gonna solder on the cables I'm gonna need. So I have to check again which cable goes where. So one more check. This goes into the VTX like so. The white cable is the RX, and the white cable goes to the TX on the PDB. A little bit of twisting. So twisting the cables actually shields them a little bit against interference. And you should also try to keep your cables as short as possible. And all of this looks like so afterwards. So the white cable goes to the TX on the PDB, the green goes to the RX on the PDB, and on the VTX it's actually the RX, the white cable is the RX on the VTX, and the green is the TX on the VTX. And if you want to use smart audio, you have to hook up the white cable to the audio channel, I think, which is over here. But I'm actually not sure on this. I would have to read the manual. But this is how I did it on my last build too, on my 6S. So let's move on to the camera. On the cam I've got ground 5 volts video and the OSD. So over here we've got the camera cable where you've got the ground, 5 volts, video and the OSD control. So the cam control, more or less. And that's actually everything for the wires in the front here. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna solder up all the ESCs. And I'm gonna have to take care about those solder bridges. So every ESC which is bridged is counterclockwise. So this here goes over here and the other one down here. So I will put those two to the side and start with this one. And I always start with the small wires. Alright, so the ESCs are finished. Actually far away from perfect, but this is what it should look like. And I'm just taking a short break for eating dinner. And then I'm gonna move on. Alright, so now it's getting tricky. I'm gonna have to solder on the motors and put the heat shrink over the ESCs. So I didn't cut the motor wires yet, because what I'm gonna do is, first of all, I'm gonna screw them in. With my motor screws here. I'm actually just using 2 screws per motor right now, because I will have to loose them again a couple times. So right now I'm just putting them on to cut the wires at the right length. First of all, I'm gonna cut them roughly where they should be. Don't gonna need those anymore. So they don't hang around in the way too much. Like so. And then I make sure that each wire is long enough and fits perfectly to the pad it should go later. And this is what I'm gonna do with each motor. So I'm gonna speed up the video. Alright, so I have pre-tinned all those motor wires to the right length now. And now I'm gonna have to solder them, but before I'm gonna need to put the heat shrink around the ESCs. Else I wouldn't be able to put the heat shrink over it again. And the tricky part about this is to solder all that stuff on there without making the heat shrink shrink. And it's actually easier with a shorter one. So I'm gonna cut it a little bit more. Should still be enough. That looks good actually. Damn, I've got way too less space here. Alright. Now it's time to solder this thing up. So the hardest part is actually finished. What I'm going to do next is I'm gonna put some double-sided sticky tape underneath those ESCs. And as soon as I push them down, I'm also gonna screw the motors onto the frame. And then I'm finished with the heaviest part of the electronics. And I'm gonna switch over to mounting the FC and doing the last steps like mounting the VTX on the top plate and all that stuff. And I'm also a little bit of a perfectionist, so what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna stick this on directly underneath the ESC. And then I'm gonna cut it into shape so I don't have too much of this sticky tape. So as you can see here, I'm just gonna take a sharp knife and cut it to the edge of the frame. As tight as possible. After that, they're gonna remove the sticker sheet and get ready to screw the motors on there. Alright, so when it's finished, it will look like this with the double-sided sticky tape underneath the ESC. I actually don't soft mount the motors, but the only thing that will get over this will be some electrical tape and those prop parts protecting the ESC. So we're gonna do all of this times 4 now, and then I'm gonna fix the motors. So my GoPro batteries are actually making my life a little bit harder, so I had to charge them up again, and I'm already a few steps ahead again. So as you can see, I've mounted all the motors. I have glued in the motor screws with the Loctite already. Can close it up actually. But just look how sexy this looks with the blue motors. Awesome. And I've also soldered the power lead to the PDB already and screwed on standoffs. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna fix the power lead to one of the standoffs, I guess. Oh no, let's put on the FC first. So here I've got the FC. The RX is still soldered up there, so I didn't do anything with the RX, I've just left it there. Oh, and I've also filed up the holes on this FC to get a little bit more space between the standoffs. And from now on, I don't have to solder anything, it's just plug and play more or less. If you use the Reverb PDB and the KISS FC, you will get the cable like this included into the package. And you definitely need to make sure that the black cable, if you look at the FC like this, that the black cable goes in the right lower plug and the white cable goes into the left lower plug. The left upper plug stays empty. So if you mess this up, you're gonna blow up your FC. So make sure that you check this is correct. So I actually gonna put on the rubber O-rings onto the standoffs first. Then I'm gonna plug in this power cable here. Let's see how we do it best. Probably like this. Then we're gonna put this thing somehow down here. Perfect. So I actually didn't change anything about the board alignment or stuff. If if you mount it like this, just make sure that it's not sitting on any cables or stuff like that. So I'm feeding the RX through here underneath. Then I put the O-rings on top of it. Put the nylon nuts on top. It's actually enough to screw it down with your fingers. You don't need any tools for it. And you also shouldn't make it too tight, else you won't have a soft mount anymore. This is actually just to get rid of the tiny vibrations from the motor. So when you're finished, it looks something like that. Now I'm gonna try to get the power lead somehow back here and put it onto the standoff. So if I lose the battery, that it doesn't actually pull on the PDB itself. And I'm probably gonna take one of the bigger zip ties. There we go. This is how I mount my power lead. So it pulls on the standoff if I lose the battery. The next thing is the receiver. So usually I also stick the receiver onto the frame with some double-sided sticky tape. Again, I'm using this thick one. So I'm cutting a small piece of it. So for now I'm just sticking it to the bottom plate like this. And now we've got one more tricky thing to do. And this is the antenna mounting. So I'm using this Crossfire standard dipole antenna. And there are a few things you should know about it. The first thing is the white cable is the active element. This is one of the most sensible parts of the antenna. The black one is the passive element, and if you mount it, you should either mount it like a dipole, which would be the same like an Immortal T, with the antenna cable going at like 90 degrees away from it, like so. Or you should mount it like an L, like so. And then you should also have it so that the antenna cable leaves the antenna with like 90 degrees away from it. And that's exactly the thing you do when you mount it like the Immortal L, like Mr. Steele does it. And this is what we're gonna do now. So first of all, we're gonna take a zip tie. And we're gonna put a piece of heat shrink on top of it. Like so. And I'm always checking the length of the antenna, and then I cut the heat shrink just before the antenna and also the zip tie, so it looks like this. And then we're gonna do the same with the passive element. But what we're gonna do now is we have to make a loop like this. It's actually hard to show you while I'm building it, so we're gonna show you afterwards. So you take the zip tie with the heat shrink with the active element in it, then you pull a loop with the second zip tie and fix it like so, and make sure that it's really extremely strong and not wobbling around, because else you will be annoyed later if it like opens up. And yeah, and then you're gonna have to put the passive elements on the zip tie and put the heat shrink on it. And again, you're gonna see the end of the passive element here. And again, I'm gonna cut it right behind it. Like so. And this is the Immortal L antenna from Mr. Steele, finished. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm already bound to this receiver, so I don't have to press the bind button anymore. So I'm feeding the antenna cable over here. Plug it into the U.FL connector, and now I'm gonna put some electrical tape around that. Like so, and we're safe and sound. The next thing I'm gonna do is probably mounting the camera. So I've also already had this cam mounted in my old quad, so it's actually just plug and play. So as I said, it's easier to set up the camera while it's not mounted into the quad, because you can set up the angle. And I'm usually flying around 25 degrees up tilt, so I'm gonna try to figure out how much up tilt I need. It really clicks in place, so that's a good thing about the Reverb frame. It's pretty solid. So I'm gonna feed the cable in here a little bit. And now we are slowly coming to the final steps. We are doing the top plate. So as I said at the beginning of the video, I've already cut this edge here, and this is for the antenna here, so it doesn't get bent back all the time, and therefore I've cut this edge out. Then we're gonna stick this thing on here. And right afterwards, we're gonna cut it off again. Because this also doesn't fit 100% for my build, as you will see in a few seconds. The battery pad. So alright, this thing should be, first of all, the VTX comes onto the top plate like this, and the antenna goes up like this, and I'm gonna feed a zip tie through this hole here to fix it down, and I'm gonna use this Velcro zip tie to lock it down through this hole. But first of all, I'm gonna have to tighten up the antenna here. This thing actually should never come loose again as soon as it's in the build. There's just one thing I'm taking care of, and this is the alignment of this nut here. There we go. So I made sure that this nut here is aligned with the connector, and the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wrap all of that with electrical tape to make sure that it never comes loose again. and also to isolate it a little bit from the carbon, because VTX and carbon isn't a good, doesn't really play well together. I'm also trying to reinforce this part of the antenna, so the coax cable where it's connected to the SMA adapter. So I'm actually trying to reinforce it because on my 6S rig I always had the problem that it got loose, and then out of the nothing after a crash I had bad video and needed to replace this antenna here. But I actually don't want to do this a lot more often. So I'm trying to stick it together and get it on the same height to the top plate with some tape again. So this tiny zip tie on its own wouldn't be enough, but it's actually just giving it the not enough space to move back or forward, and if it really has a hard crash it breaks. And then the back part here I'm gonna use this Velcro zip tie, which is actually a little bit soft and gives the antenna a little bit of space to move. The next step is to fix the VTX a little bit so it doesn't wobble in and out, and therefore I just use a tiny double-sided tape over here, not much, so the biggest part of the VTX will still be in the air. Plugging in the VTX. And mounting the last screws on there. This GoPro mount is designed by myself, by the way. And it's made for my GoPro Hero 7 Black. And no, I'm not using Hypersmooth, and no, I'm also not using Real Steady, so all the footage you've seen until now is not stabilized by anything except my fingers. So whenever I do anything with solder joints on my quads, I always use a smoke stopper to make sure that I've got no shorts in there. And it's fine. Perfect. Just have to change some last settings. But before you guys run out of battery, I I'm gonna show you the finished quad with the props on. I'm still not sure yet, maybe I just put on those black graphene props, because then the blue from the motors would shine through a little bit more. But I actually think it's okay like this. Bottom. I'm pretty fine with it, I think. Maybe I will put on just blue props. Well, anyway, I'm pretty exhausted, so doing a video like this is extremely exhausting. I never thought it would be like that. So I will do a little test hover with it and adjust some settings, and tomorrow I'm gonna go fly. So see you in the next video, probably from the spot from tomorrow.